Hi, this is Tim from UK Home Gym, your home for UK specific independent home gym tips and advice. And if you are tapering for a marathon and you feel like you're going out of your mind because you're feeling very antsy and restless and maybe even a bit lethargic, this video is for you because that's precisely what I'm doing now. I'm tapering for a marathon. I don't know, I'm a hybrid trainee, maybe that's what I guess I'd call myself. So that means that I sort of, for most of the year, I sort of give strength work and running a sort of an even sort of weighting. But if I've got a particular strength goal that I'm working towards, then I tend to sort of tip more towards strength. And if I tend to have a race coming up, then I go towards the running, and I try and balance that out. And a lot of videos on this channel are about that. But this is a very specific situation if you have a marathon coming up and you're tapering, and that's part of your strategy. And maybe you've got maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, 10 days, I don't know, whatever your particular program sort of demands for whatever you've decided in your own mind to do. Maybe you've got this sort of period of 2 or 3 weeks where you've reduced the volume of your running a lot. Maybe you've cut down on the intensity a little bit as well. I won't go into too much of that, but I mean, basically, the idea of a taper is to sort of reduce fatigue and reduce exertion so that you are fresh on race day. Well, if you've ever done this before, you will be well aware that if you go from doing a whole lot of a whole lot of running and a whole lot of strength work to doing very little, you get very antsy and very restless, and you feel really lethargic, and you start to feel in a bit of a funk, and you really want to get out there and do something, but you have to stop. And that goes, I'd say that it probably goes even more, it's even more relevant for hybrid trainees because the, your sort of default position is, oh, great, I'm not doing loads of running. That means I can get into the gym and do loads of strength work. Well, if your idea is to try and reduce fatigue, then not so fast, right? But I think, and this is the point of this video, I think there is work that you can do in a gym, and particularly in a home gym, even in the most basic of home gym setups, that is actually, I don't know if I want to say it's beneficial, but it will certainly scratch the itch of you feeling very antsy in this time. So, firstly, what's best to avoid in this kind of time? And I think the number one thing to sort of highlight here is the barbell is not your friend at this time of the year, basically. And my my training revolves around compound lifts, and I love barbell exercises. But you have to sort of look yourself in the mirror and admit that they are fatiguing, and they will fatigue possibly your lower body as well, which is something you want to you desperately want to avoid at this time. um, I don't mind maybe at the beginning of the taper doing a little bit of light barbell work, but you must reduce the weight there. Well, in my case, I do reduce the weight a lot. But as you get into the taper proper, I think, the less stuff that you do with the barbell, the better. Now, look at the lifts that you do with the barbell, particularly the lower body stuff. Forget about it. That's really going to cause a lot of fatigue. So deadlifts, squats, Romanian deadlifts, anything like that, or any sort of variation on those lifts, I think are quite fatiguing. But there are also other sort of what you might think of as upper body um, uh, sort of compound lifts, barbell lifts that do also tax the lower body without you really thinking about it. For instance, the bent over row. I do feel like there's an isometric sort of component to that. You can feel it in certain parts of your legs, probably your hamstrings and stuff like that. So that's something to be left alone. Like a standing overhead press or shoulder press or whatever you want to call it, military press. It does involve a lot of hip drive. It involves a lot of um, stability, stabilizing yourself through your core and stuff like that. Um, if you're doing it heavy, you will certainly feel that. I certainly feel it in the lower body, and particularly in the core. Um, and the other thing, even something like a T-bar row, you wouldn't think of it really, but there is definitely a stabilizing component there in the legs as well. So, you know, maybe the bench press, maybe you could do that. But again, if you're going really heavy, then you are going to be building up, fatigue, systematic fatigue. So I don't think even that is worth risking in the taper, unless you're doing it really, really light. But again, I think when you're deep into the taper, you probably want to leave all those things alone. And the other thing is, even cable exercises can involve the lower body a little bit. For instance, if you're doing quite a heavy tricep push down, you might feel that again there's like an isometric sort of component to that, and even like some cable curls. I feel like there's a stabilizing component, unless you're doing it like seated and you're sort of in a machine type situation. Maybe then you can just completely eliminate the lower body. But I think that you want to try and keep away from those kind of things. So what should you do instead? And this is where I think that dumbbells become your friend. So, as I was saying, basically a really, really basic home gym setup, maybe something that revolved around a loadable dumbbell handles and some weight plates or something like that. That's ideal for you. But maybe if you're going to a commercial gym, you could also use the dumbbells there, right? But I'll come to the home gym kind of point of this a little bit later. Anyway, so what can you do with dumbbells? This is where I think you can go and be a bit of a bro, and you can focus more on isolation lifts, because I think isolation lifts are really good for a taper for two reasons. First, they're not too systematically taxing. I mean, they'll tax the particular muscles that you target, but they're not systematically taxing. And secondly, you can kind of spam them. If you sort of think of the meme, the spamming lateral raise meme, right? You've heard of that one before, probably. Why do people say you can spam it? In part, I think because it is an exercise that doesn't really cause you much fatigue, and it's something you can come back to, maybe in a couple of days and do again. And things like, I mean, if we're looking at specific exercises aside from the lateral raise, okay. Well, no, actually, let's talk about the lateral raise for a moment. I mean, the lateral raise, I never do lateral raises because I'm not really into the aesthetic part of lifting so much. I mean, it's definitely a factor, but it's not the most important thing for me. But instead of doing lots of OHP, lots of overhead press stuff, which I love doing, I do 2, maybe 3 times a week in some variation or other. This is the time when you can do the lateral raises, and it's quite humbling to do lateral raises because you might be quite strong with the barbell pushing overhead, but when you start just using the side delts there to do those exercises there, you might find yourself having to go with a lower weight, particularly if you want to do a bit more volume. So that's a great exercise to do. What else can you do? You can do those, of course, with the dumbbells. I prefer using the tri-grip weight plates if possible. But again, it's not an exercise I do very often. What can you do with the dumbbells? That's isolation. Well, again, leave the lower body alone if possible. Maybe you're doing really light stuff with the lower body if you've got that in your plan. If that's something that you originally wanted to do, and reduce the weight as you get closer to race day. But the thing where you can just really go for it is the triceps. the biceps, the forearms. You know, those ones I feel you can really go for it there. Um, you you can do those as often as you like, really. I mean, within reason. I mean, you don't want to start straining tendons and stuff like that. But if you're doing dumbbell curls, maybe incline curls, reverse curls, you're doing tricep extensions, French press, all sorts of exercises there that target the arms. I think that's not going to cause you much systematic fatigue, and it's going to sort of scratch the itch that you have of, not really being able to do too much exercise. Um, you know, maybe here's a possible strategy for you. Maybe you do a long run every Sunday or whatever, and then you've sort of just before the taper you did your longest run. You're going to do, I don't know, maybe you do 34, 35 kilometers or whatever. Okay, and from that point you're coming down, and all of a sudden you find that your Sundays are instead of the entire morning being taken up by a long run, it's only a small part of the morning, right? As you come down, I don't know, maybe you start doing a half, 15 or whatever. I don't know how you structure your taper, but you suddenly find, oh, I've got all this time. In that time, do do those isolation lifts with the dumbbells. They're easy. You can start, if you even if you want to do higher volume, go for it. I don't see a problem with it. I don't see that you like fatiguing yourself out with this. Personally, I like a little bit less volume and a bit heavier weight. But if you're like after that sort of cardio sort of workout and you really want to sort of feel the volume in there, I don't think you're going to fatigue yourself doing this. So why? Let's go back to why this really works best with a home gym. Maybe it's already obvious to you, but I mean, if you've got all this equipment at home and you don't need to, I don't know, get in your car and drive somewhere and park somewhere and then go to the gym and so on. You've got that option whenever you need to, whenever you feel the need to go and do your those isolation lifts. You can just go ahead and do them in the home gym. And the second great thing about it, having a home gym during the taper, is maybe you'll think I'm being a bit of a hypochondriac here, but I think a lot of people spend a lot of time, put a lot of effort into their marathons, and the taper is the time. It's quite a sort of dangerous time in terms of being able to pick up an injury, or catch something, catch a cold or something like that. And if you're not in a gym, a commercial gym full of people coughing and not wiping the equipment down after they finish with it, that might be something to bear in mind. If you've got all of your dumbbells and whatever at home, boom, you can just go out there and use them whenever you need to and not run the risk. I think some people that will resonate with some people, I'm sure. Anyway, those are my basic sort of tips for how not to lose your mind during the taper, and how to actually get some exercise in and scratch the itch, as it were. Anyway, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about this. Are you tapering for a marathon now? What are your strategies to not go crazy during this time? Please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. That really helps me to grow the channel. Please do check out our website. That's ukhomegym.com. And I'll see you next time on UK Home Gym.